everyone for attending today. I'm excited for this panel that we're going to have of preparing the flight path for women in aerospace. I'll introduce myself really briefly, and then I'll let Nick and Shelly introduce themselves. But I'm a strategy analyst here at Aerospace Accelerated. We run our accelerator, and we're in cohort 4 currently, so very exciting. And I have been at Boeing for a little over 3 years now, and I've rotated across a few business functions through my rotation program, and I also have started the D&I committee in my rotation program. So I'm very passionate about D&I, and I'm very excited to kind of have this discussion today. So Nick and Shelly.
Sure, I can go next. I'm Nick Bates. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm the managing partner at Aerospace Accelerated, and at Boeing I lead all of our global accelerators and innovation programs. With a team based right across the world. I'm delighted to say a team of women based right across the world, and we're one of the only all female teams at Boeing. It's great to be here today to have this conversation. It's a really important one, and one that, you know, us as a team feel really passionate about. How do we collectively come together and make sure that we're doing the best that we can to open up the doors and make sure that we get more great women into the aerospace industry and to support us moving forward. And I'm delighted to have Shelly here with us today. So Shelly, I'll hand over to you for an introduction.
Well, I'm Shelly Sporin. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Infinite Branches. And what I do, I work with startup businesses within the aviation industry, as well as individuals and family offices that want to come into the aviation industry. I provide them with the strategic solutions to meet their unique needs of the industry. I like to say that I'm a recovering banker, and before that, I'm a recovering banking regulator. So my experiences expand beyond just the aviation industry. It involves the tech, it involves wine, consumer goods, as well as making sure I have a lot of fun with everyone with whom I work with. What I also do, I also serve as the VP of Leader Development for the International Aviation Women's Association, where we are truly focused on identifying, building the pipeline of female leaders in the aviation industry globally, not just business aviation, where I am truly focused upon, but also in cargo and commercial and aerospace. So I'm so incredibly delighted to be here. This has been a series of wonderful introductions and connectivity, and the appreciation that women in the aviation and aerospace industry have for each other.
Wow.
Dina, back over to you.
Wow, you both are very accomplished in the industry, and I'm very excited to kind of pick your brains on, you know, your experiences and the things that you've seen in your careers. I think that being a female in the aviation industry is very rare, or being a one that is promoted very heavily. So I think it's really cool that we can ask these questions today. But I think I just kind of want to jump in to kind of ask what progress, you know, you both think has been made in the aerospace industry throughout your careers and how you've seen things change. I think that would be really insightful to hear.
Sure. I think, Shelly, you're probably better qualified to answer this question than I am. I still feel like a bit of a fraud in the aerospace sector, in that it was never an intention of mine to end up in aerospace. It's been one of those things that happened. But clearly, you know, from my background in more in the core, you know, tech space and tech startup space, it's a similar issue. You know, we don't see a great representation of women, and we know that, you know, women getting, you know, female founders raising investment is still a real challenge in the industry. However, I think that now it does feel like a bit of a moment in time where now we're actually having these conversations. You know, 10, 15 years ago, we weren't. This wasn't a subject that anyone really thought was that important that we needed to put a, you know, concerted effort into. And I think a lot of it, you know, there's a lot more acceptance now that actually whenever we have female founded companies, they perform better financially. So I think that that's more widely accepted now, that is the case. Diversity, doesn't need a business case. It actually makes sense, for us to have diverse organizations, and aerospace is no different. So I think that it's great that we do see lots of organizations now around aerospace actively promoting, women into leadership roles in aerospace, because the business case stacks in aerospace just as much as it does everywhere else. So I think that there's no doubt that, we have a very, very long way to go. But I think that we are starting to gather some momentum, and we do have these spaces where we can come together and have these conversations, not just with women, but with our male colleagues as well. That conversation is spilled out, into the public domain, which is a really positive thing, which means that we can address it, we can talk about it, and we can begin to, make this more a more realistic career path for women, because I think that perhaps a lot just don't think about it because they're not exposed to it. They don't see it. They don't see women in these leadership roles in aerospace. And now we have a lot more avenues to make sure that visibility is there. And that, hopefully that in itself almost, it'll gather its own pace as we all continue to come together and push these issues forward.
That's so well said, Nick. And one of the things that I've said before, and some of you may have heard it, is that because there is the business case for diversity, investors are listening to this and they are demanding it of companies. And so boards are having to react to this. And you also have what's happening throughout the world. Governments are mandating it now. So particularly if they want to see companies pay more taxes, it just makes more sense to do that. But what we have the opportunity to do for all of us is make an investment in the pipeline, make sure every single woman who wants to come into the industry or doesn't even know about it realizes that we are a welcoming industry. We want to pull you in. We want to make sure you have the skills and the opportunities that are there. What I'm seeing through my involvement in Iowa is that many more companies, larger global organizations, truly value what they are receiving from their investment in building diverse teams, not just female-led, but people from different areas, different experiences. That is something that we all must focus in on, the success stories, and looking at how we achieve those successes so that we can further build our teams and our organizations so that we can achieve those goals that we all have.
I agree. I do think there also has there's a lot of work to be done still. I think when I was looking for certain startups in certain category, I would face, responses from people saying, look, I don't think there's enough female-founded startups in that space. And there actually were. There was a lot, but there was this inherent bias, that there wouldn't be, and that it would be wasting time to kind of focus our energies on looking for female-founded startups in that category. So I think there does have a lot more work to be done too.
I would agree as far as getting the messaging right. How are you building your teams? What do you plan to accomplish? And how is diversity going to make an impact that hasn't been there yet in your particular niche, your particular focus of the industry? Those items must be communicated and they need to be thought through. And I also want to say something too. I've been meeting more women who have come into the aviation industry who never thought that they could be a part of it because they only thought that we needed pilots and mechanics. And the reality is, I saw a diagram recently that there's well over 100 categorized jobs that run the gamut from leadership all the way to the technical aspects of it. And one of my friends, Liz Sarah, who ran the U.S. Women's Business Council for years, created not one, but 3 different tech companies. And she said, the truth is, I'm not a techie, I'm not an engineer, but I know what leadership looks like. and I know how to build a business. And so we can have this great opportunity to bring in people who can be additive and who can create the products and the services that our industry needs in order to achieve the goals of growth that we have for the future. And that's what's exciting. And how we build that pipeline together is a testament to our devotion to connection and collaboration. And for me, those are some of the greatest strengths of our industry, the connections and the collaboration.
I would agree. And Nick, you might be able to speak to the, what we were talking about yesterday with, bringing women into the industry and into, places like Boeing, where, it might not just be aviation related functions that they could be in. They could be in HR functions and just other functions as well too.
Exactly, and that's it. As Boeing is a 140,000 person organization. We have opportunities for people in literally every walk of life, field, of expertise that you can imagine. And that's the thing that fascinates me about the company, the sheer scale of Boeing, that there are all of these opportunities. But the big thing is, why would anyone consider coming into aerospace? Why us? And I think that has to be about, I certainly think about it in the sense of, as a woman, would I want to join an organization? And, let's be honest, we've all been, had our LinkedIn inboxes hit up with a million offers of late, given the state of the market. And one of the first things that I always do is look at their board. Is it all white men? And I've had this conversation, with lots of companies over the last few years, and said, I just wouldn't consider it. Because when I look at your company, it looks like a company that I don't fit in. I don't see myself there. And I think that that's really important, that organizations not only do the right things, but also are out there and visible, doing the right things and being that open and welcoming space for women, because we are 50% of the population. We are 50% of the talent. And if we are losing, no organization in the world can afford to lose 50% of the best talent. So I think that, there is a big piece there about us not just doing it, but making sure that we're talking about it as well. And I know that, certainly in the last year for me at Boeing, I've been part of a development program. There were a number of women on that program. It was very intensive in terms of, travel, time away from home, level of work effort required. And the amount of women that came around me within the company to support, to make sure I had what I needed to talk to about all of these other things that you had, kids being off school, how are we going to balance that? All of these things that isn't really my employer's problem. That's a personal issue for me to sort. But I was really impressed with how many, of my female colleagues came around, to support, ask what else they could do to help. Considering me in a way that I maybe hadn't considered myself. Was I doing too much? Was I taking on too much? Did I need some extra help? Things that I just didn't consider asking for help for. And they were, fully and freely offered. So I think that it's that as well, that we, as not just as women, but as colleagues, looking out for one another. I think that we all, especially in this environment now, we're all on all the time. So that idea of, work and non-work time has kind of blurred significantly. And I think, and especially with COVID and everything else, we all got to know, what everyone's home looked like in the background, whose dog barks at the postman, all of those things. So I think that, I think we've all had this opportunity to get a lot closer to our colleagues. And I think that provides us with significantly more opportunity to support one another. And I think that, to me, that's one of the things that we should try not to lose as we go back to normal life after the pandemic. But actually try to make sure that we, continue to keep up that personal connection to one another. Because I think that's what opens up our industry and provides people with more opportunities when they feel safe to have all of the conversations about not just, their career aspirations, but the impact that has on their personal life too.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree. This is the first time I've also been on a all-woman team, which is mixed team, and I think that you get this sense of support that you don't really have in other teams. I think that being and surrounding yourself by like powerful women actually motivates you, and gives you these opportunities and advices that you normally wouldn't get in other aspects and environments. So, but Shelley, were you going to say something? Sorry.
Well, I just have to make a comment here is what you're doing. You're seeing powerful women empower other women to move forward. And we need to highlight that this is how we can bring other women in who have never considered the aviation industry or aerospace industry as a career. Because what I have seen, particularly through Iowa, is people reaching out. There's a few people who are here as attendees who I'm smiling because you took time out of your very busy schedule this time of year to come here and to listen and also be a source of support. But I had debated, I knew I was leaving my prior employer and I had no idea what I wanted to do, but there were people who I could come to who were a source of strength, who were a source of support, and who were willing to be kind to me. And I think that that's something that we need to highlight. There's a difference between being nice, which I like to equate with telling somebody what they want to hear, versus being kind, giving them the tough love because you value and respect them. And you know that they may be stuck, but what you have to say, because you have that trust, it'll move them over that hurdle. And this is such a great strength of this industry. And quite frankly, female leadership, that they'll reach out and ask you, what do you need? Because I think what a lot of women do is we forget to ask for support. We forget to ask for what we need. And we all need to be better at doing that, not just for ourselves, but also giving people that gentle push to move themselves forward because we can see their greatness in the making.
Yeah, and then that just, Shelley, that just makes me, think as well about, because I think that when we talk about that, we automatically think about the women that are more senior than we are. And I actually think that I've probably learned the most from the women that are less senior in in level terms at Boeing than I have. Some of these young women that are coming up, coming up, as we talked about this yesterday, coming up behind us, they're such an inspiration. They come with such energy, and maybe idealism about the future that is, I find that inspiring to see, and I know that from the team of women that I work with, both at the AX program and here at Boeing, I think that there's a lot that we can all learn from each other. So don't think about it just as I need to take advice or support, ask for support from above. I know that some of the best support that I have gotten has actually been from those, my colleagues around, or those that are coming up with just a very, very different perspective than I have, and that's super valuable.
You hit upon something that is so important. We need to continue to stay curious and reinvest in those relationships. I can see in the attendee list 2 of my mentees, and I'm thrilled because they have given me so much that's allowed me to grow. And yes, they are earlier in their careers, but whenever you get involved in a mentoring program, even if you are supposed to be the mentor, you need to stay open and be willing to constantly learn how things are being done today and the tools that are needed, because that's going to be the way that we continue to engage that next generation of leaders in our industry, and also, quite frankly, make them feel welcome. If they want to come in with a new idea and a different way to do things, we should be saying, no, you can't do that because it's never been done. We should be leaning in and saying, really, I've never heard it expressed that way. Say more. And that's one of our talents that we need to foster and we need to highlight and we need to elevate. This is what great mentorship looks like. Being open, being curious, and being willing to bring others with you in the process. I mean, it's a journey. A career is a journey. And it's not linear. Mine has certainly not been linear. It looks like Trollstian, which is one of the windiest roads in all of Europe. And I look back on every single hardship that I may have had in my career, and I'm at the point where I can say, I needed that. I needed that to grow and move myself forward. But what I'm trying to do as a mentor now is facilitate conversations with people who are younger in their careers to see this is part of their path. And the important part is to say, okay, you're going to grow through this. And let's look forward to the growth that comes from it. Because once you get through that, you build the confidence and the grit and the resilience to continue to move forward.
And you know, what advice would you both have for young women and just women in general that are trying to seek mentors, especially in a world where mentorship is pretty, you know, popular in the US, but not really internationally? Like, kind of what advice would you have for women seeking mentors?
Nick, I'll let you take this one because what you have to say about it shows, it just highlights the different worlds we're living in. And it really is important to understand the dynamics in the US versus the rest of the world.
Yeah, so you both know that I cringe at the thought of mentorship because I know that as a British person, it's like, yeah, no, we don't do that. It's just so culturally so different, and I think that, you know, we've been sort of chatting about it internally as well, because there's clearly that value in having that community. And you know, we've been thinking about it a lot at Aerospace Accelerated, you know, with our mentorship program that we run. It's very US centric. And we're like, why? And I'm like, because I'm a Brit. We don't do mentorship. It's not a thing. We don't ask for help. And I think that it's more about building that community. And so I think that the words that we use and how we describe it, you know, I think that in reality, we do have mentors. We just don't think about it in that way, and we wouldn't have the conversations as directly as perhaps happen in the US, you know, or as planned, and it would be more, you know, that community, friends and family, we would see that as asking for support. So I think that there is something, you know, outside of the US that we need to think about. How do we make people feel more comfortable to build that network and build, you know, what we just kind of described yesterday is, you know, your own personal board of advisors. How do we help people build that and think about it in that way, and help them get a lot more comfortable with, and again, Shelley, I think it goes back to this, how do we get people comfortable with asking for help? Because that's not something that, particularly as women, where, you know, it's not necessarily our go-to. So I think that there is definitely cultural differences, and I know that Vina and I have talked about that across different cultures as well, and how that manifests. So I think that that's something that we need to put a little bit more energy into next year, is thinking about what are the nuances across cultures and across geographies around mentoring, and how do we get to the same end result where people do have that support network, regardless of what we want to call it or how that manifests itself.
So well said, Nick. And I'm always a resource for you. Whatever you need, just let me know, because I appreciate and I value you and the work that the team is doing. So what I'd like to do is take a step back and say, just come in with a realistic view of what mentoring is and what good mentoring is. It is not a quick path to advancing your career. You need to think of this as part of your journey. And there are times where you want a mentor, times where you want a coach, and sometimes that overall board of directors, a mentor can easily port to being a member of your personal advisory board. But as you seek a mentor, really think, what are you looking for? Why do I want to value this person's wisdom? How can I make myself someone who they should take a look at? Because mentorship, again, is a two-way street. And that's how I like to talk to people. It's like, what can I give to you, and what can I gain from being a part of your network? What I try and focus on now is building my own personal board of directors. And what that involves in people who aren't even the aviation industry. I have some that are and some that aren't, but they're diverse views to get me out of my head, keep my confidence levels where they need to be, and give me that bit of tough love when I need it. So, what I would say to anyone who's seeking a mentor, and you can seek a mentor wherever you are in your career, be open to learning, be open to giving in the process, and make sure that the time you spend together will be impactful.
I definitely agree about the two-way street. I think it's also really important to be genuine, you know, in your interactions with a mentor, like exactly what you were saying. It's not going to be helpful coming to the conversation saying like, what job can you get for me? You know, like, you know, that's not the right way to approach your mentorship. It's not just job advice, and it's life advice. From my mentors, I've received advice on, you know, what's the kind of life, personal life you want to have, and how does that, you know, fit in with the type of business life you want. And I think they've also seen things for me that I haven't been able to see for myself with jobs and opportunities. And I think it's really important to trust your mentor, and trust that they know what's best for you. And I think that's a huge thing in mentorship as well.
And one thing I'd like to add too is that as a mentor, I never tell anybody what to do. I try and take what they are going through and gives them some ways that they can come to on their own that will move them forward. So it's my goal to essentially poke the bear a little bit, and the bear being whatever challenge they're facing, and have them see it in a different way that can be useful for them. Because ultimately, as a mentor, you want somebody to grow and do it in a way that is impactful to them, rather than to say, okay, here's what you have to do. And that may not be the best path for that particular person.
I just see a question here, question in the Q&A that's interesting, which is the reluctancy for asking for help a corporate problem? And do we think that founders or entrepreneurs are maybe more comfortable with asking for help because they're giving more space not to know everything? Maybe injecting more entrepreneurial thinking can help with this. I think that's quite interesting. I know that in the tech community, the culture has always been to give first. So I think that sort of lends itself to the idea that, we help those other founders around us with their challenges, with with a sounding board. So I think that culturally, maybe that's, maybe less competitive than perhaps the corporate environment is. But I'm not sure, Shelley, what are your thoughts on that?
This is a great question, and it's causing me to really think about where the person is coming from that would ask this question. I mean, this goes back to every single corporation has its own unique culture.
Yeah.
Some are focused on truly advancing teams. And those are the environments where I've personally seen people foster that, just reaching out, being willing to provide support, being able to put somebody into an environment where they can learn and grow and bring others with them. And teamwork, when it is rewarded, both financially and otherwise, can affect that focus of having people become willing to ask for help. I've seen it, though, the exact opposite in dynamics, where compensation is tied to your success. And I want to make something very clear. Successes are single points in time. They do not equate to value. And people often conflate their successes to their value. And when that is tied to money, it can make for a very toxic situation where people do not feel comfortable reaching out and providing the support. So it is a cultural issue from my perspective, and it is something that is a leadership challenge as well as a management challenge too.
That's a really good point. I think so. I think the company culture plays a huge aspect in, asking for help. And I think as women, I think you can help in your own little microcosm, increase the acceptance and, the ability for people to come approach you, just be more approachable. And I think, that would be huge too. But I see another question in the Q&A about, can you please elaborate on how to navigate imposter syndrome? We are all very familiar with imposter syndrome, I'm sure, but how do you navigate it?
Well, first of all, I hate referring to it as being a syndrome. And when I talk to men about, they'll ask me, Shelley, what do you think of this imposter syndrome stuff? And I say, we start talking about what it is, and they say, well, men have imposter syndrome. It's a lack of confidence. So let's break it down. What do you do when you have a lack of confidence? Do you turn in or do you turn outward to your community? And this is where having confidence and the courage to make connections and collaborate with others can build your self-esteem and show that you are making an impact. And going back to what we said before, empowering other people to be their best. So for me, attacking imposter syndrome is more or less saying, okay, I'm having a bad day. Where can I be valuable? How can I support other people? And that's how I deal with a lack of confidence and how I build myself up and how I look to empower other people as well.
So I think I probably have the most politically incorrect answer to this question. And that because, you do feel that sometimes what am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing. And my advice to that is really simple. Look at all of the mediocre men that are around you that appear to be doing really well. And if anybody out there has a challenge with identifying any of those mediocre men, give me a call. I have a huge list I can direct you to. So I would say that, I think that we sometimes, I think that you almost need, and again, I think this kind of goes back to that, that community around you, having someone that you can call up and say, as Shelley said, I'm having a bad day. Like I feel like I'm failing at everything. It is not going well, whatever, someone to be your cheerleader, someone to say, you've nailed it today. You've knocked it out of the park. Or let's be honest, to have a bitch about that man in your, in your world that's just useless, but seems to be doing really well. Sometimes that all that you need is that vent to make you realize that actually I'm not doing too bad. This is okay. It'll pass. I'll get through it. And again, I think that comes back to community and comes back to that, having a group of people around you, be that men or women, that you can go to and be vulnerable and have that conversation and know that they have your back. Know that they're going to be there to support you and to cheer you on. I think is probably the most valuable thing that you can do. I think that we don't think about it and therefore don't put enough effort into maintaining that. And that's where things get really difficult, I think.
No, you're right on the nose. I think women tend to discount their, accomplishments a lot. There's something where women won't apply to a job unless they feel like they're completely qualified for it, but men will just apply at any level. And so I think, women have to just kind of, be confident in the fact that they are accomplished and, don't worry too much because, there are a lot of mediocre men out there too doing, the same thing you are. So, you can just take confidence in that. But yeah, I think that's a really good option. And then I was going to ask, what advice would you give to women entering this profession?
Build your network and don't be afraid to reach out to other people because at some point they were exactly where you are today. And look at people who, like I said before, who are doing great work that you appreciate, you value, and ask to set up some time with them to get to know them a little bit more. Make an investment. These days, when I see somebody's profile on LinkedIn, I reach out and I say, you have such an amazing background. I'd love to be a source of support for you. And that starts the process too. You never know when those connections that you make casually but you've invested in over time will be there for you. You just don't know. And so appreciate the time you have with people. Ask questions, be curious. Don't keep those questions to yourself, because ultimately you want to get to know. It may lead you down a different path than where you are today. And that's a good thing most of the time.
Yeah, and I would say, try to focus on what you're passionate about. I know that, looking at aerospace would never on my radar. That was never, going to be in the lineup for me. It just, I don't know why. I never would have thought about it. But now that I'm here and I look around and I see how much opportunity there is, right across the business, I think that there's huge opportunity in aerospace in pretty much every, as I said, every profession. So think about it in that way. What is it that you're really passionate about? And I think that what Shelley said is, is perfect, is look out for those people or those women that you see in that segment and you are, are inspired by, and tell them. Because I think that that's one of the best thing that you can do, is to start off by being someone else's cheerleader, support someone else, because I think that there is a kind of virtuous circle with that. And particularly if you are that sort of person that is out to support, I think that's really authentic. And people like to help people, people like nice people. So rather than just being, out for yourself and very transactional, actually get in and be a part of the community. Because I think that's where opportunities will open up. I'll also tell you that I never, the job that I'm in today and how I ended up at Boeing, I didn't go out with an intention to do that. It was my community and my network that came to me and said, this job is here. We really think you should be in it. This is what you want to do. And that's how I got here. So when you think about it in that way, if you're out and you're out being passionate, talking about the things that really excite you, things that you want to do, supporting others in that, you'll be amazed at the opportunities that just come to your door because of how you've been. When you're able to demonstrate your expertise and your passion for something, you'll be amazed at the amount of people that'll come around and actually want to champion and support you into another role that maybe you would never have considered, because I know that's certainly what happened for me.
And I'll take that one step further and say, don't be afraid to champion other women. I do that. I think people may get sick of it, but realize this is something I'm passionate about, women supporting other women and not being afraid to do it. So you'll see me make comments on whenever I see Nick do something really amazing or any other woman within my network. I want to be there as a source of support. I had a strange thing in past lives in my career where I actually saw men pitting women against each other, and they were enjoying it. Mm-hmm. This happened on more than one occasion. And so what I did was just start reaching out to other women, particularly when things were not going well, and saying, what can I do to be a source of support? I saw this happen. Next time we're in a meeting, this is what I'm going to do, and make sure that you have the support you need. So when you can be intentional about your support for other women and speaking highly about them and bringing others with you to the table, it really does create a virtuous circle. I've been invited into so many new relationships because of this, because a woman who knows truly I am committed, I have the best intentions, and I work towards realizing the goals that I have, which is to build other people to be their best.
No, that's really insightful. Being champion for other women is so important. I think when I was in college, I saw the aviation industry, I saw finance, and I said they were like boys clubs. I don't know how I could fit in. And a woman, like a female leader, reached out to me about Boeing. That's why I'm here today at a Women Business Leaders Association roundtable, right? So women supported me, and I continue to want to support other women. And I reach out to my university a lot, trying to get other women into the aerospace industry, because I feel like that's really important, championing others. And I think I see another one in the chat. about the role of male allies in the corporate and startup world. So I know you were saying that you've seen men pit women against women, but have you seen male allies, and what can be done better on the other side of the coin?
I've absolutely had a lot of male allies throughout my career that far outweigh the ones that make really bad decisions. And perhaps that's me and the people who I bring into my network. But there are so many men, and this is one of the reasons why Iowa invited men to start joining in a role that is titled the advocate role. And we strongly believe that we want not just you to be a member, we want you to become involved, because what you put into an organization is exactly what you're going to get out of it. And we include them on our panels and whatever discussions we may have, because we need to support each other. This goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning. Diversity does matter. It makes us better organizations. It makes us better leaders. It makes us more nimble. We make better products. We make better decisions together when we're willing to listen to many different perspectives and pick things apart and get curious and have those conversations that move us all forward. But men can and they need to be a part of our network, because quite frankly, there's so few women of us in the industry that if we don't embrace them, we don't include them at our own boards, our personal boards, we're not going to be able to move our careers forward and achieve the goals that we personally have.
Yeah, I agree with that, Shelley. And even the idea that, if we only surround ourselves with women, then we end up with the same problem, just different, because we don't have diversity in the thought processes that are around us. And I do think that, it's hard in the sense that I know that, I've witnessed, male colleagues who have tried to be good allies get ostracized because of it. I have seen that happen. But I think that now, as we all continue to push this agenda and push these issues forward, I think that that's becoming less and less. So I think that the more that can happen, and sometimes as the only woman in the room, it's very difficult to say some things. And I know that I have male colleagues that be looking at me across the table, knowing exactly, when you have that connection, they're looking at you and they know what you're thinking and you know what they're thinking. And it's them being brave enough to stand up and say it, because it's not always easy for us to say it, being the other in the room. But again, I think that comes from building that relationship with not just with women, but with men as well, so that they understand and they feel empowered to be able to say those things on your behalf when you're not in a position to raise the issue, or whether that's just to hold space for you in that meeting, when inevitably you're giving your opinion and you're being completely ignored, and having one of your male colleagues repeat it, and that get acknowledged. So it's building those relationships and being able to have those conversations, and I think that only comes as you invest your time into building those good, strong relationships with both male and female colleagues.
That's so well said, Nick. And I really appreciate what you just said about that, because we have to build the pipeline together of great leaders. And women will not advance if we do stay together by ourselves. We have to let others in. We have to let those different opinions and realities. But this also goes back to what was said before. We need to be comfortable in asking for what we need. And if that's building relationships with others, we have to have those great, deep conversations.
I agree. And speaking of this kind of conversation of male allies, do you experience resistance when operating in your male industry? You probably do, but how do you best navigate through these power structures of being in male-dominated industries? I think it's a better question.
Nick, why don't you take this and I'll follow with it.
So if I'm really honest, I feel like an imposter here, in the sense that I, previously, being in the, not so much the aerospace industry, but in the defense industry, I was, for 10 or 15 years of my career, the only woman in the room. There were never any other women. And I used to almost play to it. I absolutely did play the weak female role, and as a way to be accepted. And it was only whenever it was a male that pulled me aside one day, and he's a male African-American, and he pulled me aside one day and he said, you got to stop doing this. You've got to start standing up, stop letting their comments slide, stop laughing when they make the jokes. You're now, he was obviously being very rude. You're obvious, you're now old. So there's all these young women coming behind you. You need to stand up. And he talked to me about, about representation and about, actually making this concerted effort, rather than, and explain to me how the playing field isn't level. We've got to accept that. The whole world is set up to, for a certain demographic, and, to be successful. It's not set up as a level playing field. That's just not how the world works. And that actually, you have to stand up and challenge it, and you have to stand up and do that every single day. Because if we don't, then the playing field never gets leveled. And that was, one of those really transformational conversations for me, in that I really started to think about how I was behaving and how other women were then seeing me, because I would not have been overly welcoming, because my position was only female in the room. That was my spot. There was only space for one of us, and it was mine. So I think that, having that conversation, that realization that actually this is not right. And actually I can't go further on my own. You got to go together. And so I think it was, for me, that was a kind of moment of self-reflection and thinking, yeah, just playing along with the system doesn't actually get us any further forward. And I do, I know that for me, having a daughter, was one of those, I feel a responsibility in terms of what I do to model for her. I don't need to do it for me. It doesn't matter that much for me, but it matters more for me that I do something to fix it for her and those that are coming after me. So, I think that it's a really hard one. How do we navigate it, and how do we do it? I think that we all just have to do the best that we can. I know that everyone doesn't have the freedom or the privilege to be able to say the things, but when you have it, do it. Make those moves as small as they might seem, chipping away those tiny incremental chips. If we all do that, then that will be enough to move us forward. And I know that it's not always easy to do. It's much easier to say. But again, I think if we do it together, then I think that it's much more achievable for us all then.
Very well said. My experience in the aviation industry at my first aviation industry conference, and granted, this is business aviation, I looked around the room and I maybe saw two women sitting together across and one behind in a room of 50 people. And I realized, what did I get myself into here? And as I walked to the ladies' room at the break, there was a queue out the door of the men's room. It was like going to a hockey match. And I was thinking, oh, geez, I'm going to be here forever, waiting to get into the ladies' room. Nope, I walked straight in. And these two women whose voices I had heard, because up until that time, I had phone and email conversations with people. Those were the relationships that I had. And I recognized their voices. And they were two icons in the industry who'd been in it for over 30 years. And they wanted to know who I was. And we had this great conversation in the ladies' room. And one of them said, oh, well, who are you sitting with at lunch? And I said, well, I don't know. My boss had to go back to San Francisco. And she said, you're sitting with me. And she took me around and introduced me to all the people who she felt I needed to know. They were not necessarily the people who my boss felt I needed to know, but I've kept up with those relationships from that time. And that enabled me to see this industry is something different. There are women in this industry who want more women to come to the table. Now, every single conference I go to, I'm having a reunion in the ladies' room with a lot of the women, because it just shows you we're still not near parity. But every time I have a chance to, I do what Brenda Cobb did for me. And I try and bring other women around to meet the people who they really need to meet, who their bosses may not think they need to, but I know. So it's being able to look at that and say, we are going to build a longer table and not a higher wall. Thank you, Chef Jose Andre, for coming up with that wonderful podcast and idea. And it's a great visual, but we have to be dedicated to building that and being a part of the solution rather than the problem.
Yeah, I think it's really important to note that women are not each other's competition. I think we've discussed this in our team a lot. The real competition is much bigger and much harder. So if women are being pitted against each other, then we're wasting a lot of our time and energy on each other, and that's not how it should be. So I think that's really beautiful how, you know, that mentor of yours like introduced you to everyone, decided to build a longer table, right? So I think that's a really important takeaway from this conversation. And I know we only have a few more minutes, but if there's any other questions that anyone wants to ask, like please put them in the Q&A. I know someone had asked, how can we know more about the Aerospace Accelerated and stay connected with the community? LinkedIn is probably the best avenue for that. But is there any other questions anyone would like to ask in the next few minutes, or anything, Nick and Shelley, that you would like to wrap up with?
Yeah, I just see Ksenia has posted in the chat as well about, you know, the Aerospace Accelerated program, and this is, you know, we do run effectively a sub program inside the program where we run specific sessions for all of the women that come through the program. So not just the founders, but all of the you know, the clever tech people and you know, everyone that's around those small businesses. And the reason that we do that is really to, first of all, we started it with what are the challenges? What can we do to support you, you know, women in this industry to, you know, to really help accelerate your, you know, your growth in the industry. And then one of the things that was super interesting to me, so we had set this up for the women. We were very clear, this is what we're going to do. We're going to, you know, bring all the women in the program together and look at what we can do to help them and so on. And then there was a man that joined the session, and we were all like, oh, we didn't really think about this. And he joined, and when we asked him why, he said, because I'm building a company and I want to know. I want to know what I need to do to make sure that I'm building a company that isn't just for men. That he wanted to be very intentional as he set out to grow his company to ensure there was opportunity for everyone. And we followed up with him. We actually invited him to our team offsite last month, and I asked him how that was going. You know, why did you do that? Why is that interesting? He said to me, well, do you know what, Nick? We've been hiring all of these fantastic female engineers, and I, as a founder, I'm actually prepared to pay them more than their male colleagues because they're just better. And it was a really, you know, and it was a revelation to him. It was, you know, and it was wonderful. And he also said that, you know, that actually the men's behavior was much better. The culture in the organization was much better. He actually described it as, you know, the guys actually get a shower every day and look pretty coming to work because they know they're going to be women in the office, whereas if it was just men, they'd be all slobs and none of them would ever shower. And I know I'm being facetious, but he just, you know, he equated that to having an environment where everyone was bringing their best selves to the office, and he genuinely believes that that's because he has a diverse team now, only because he intentionally set out to create one.
Wow. That's simply amazing and very funny, and I think I know who you're talking about.
It's such a great
Oh yeah,
story. And we need to hear more about the successes, about what happens when you hire a diverse team. And we can all share that and highlight it with whatever we do when we're having conversations with others, when we choose to post on LinkedIn after attending a conference and meeting people. You know, we have power within us. Even if you're early in your career, we have the power to put our hands up and say, this is really cool.
I agree. I think that's good. And I know we're right on the 10 o'clock mark here in PhD. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Nick and Shelley, for a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I hope everyone could take something away. You can keep up with Nick and Shelley on LinkedIn, and then as well as our Aerospace Accelerated newsletter. So thank you everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, Vina. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Vina. Thank you, everyone, for being here and taking time out of your schedule. This was such a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate everyone who was a part of it.